Our final demonstrator feature for this year's North Carolina Heritage Fair is leatherworker Yolanda Prince. And Yolanda lives right here in Hidnite, actually. And so we are pleased to call her one of our own. She is unique to the heritage demonstrators in that she actually came as an adult to North Carolina Heritage Fair and began mentoring from the original leatherworker with North Carolina Heritage Fair. Mike Lowe has since passed, but he passed to her his knowledge, his skill, and certainly his love for working with leather. And so we are so pleased that she took everything that he taught her and ran with it. And so she has moved on as a very well-respected leather worker in the field of heritage demonstrators. She has gone on to be part of the Village of Yesteryear at North Carolina State Fair, and we're very proud of how she has accomplished everything in the leatherworking field, but more importantly, she continues to be willing to share that with young people as we together work to preserve the folk heritage of North Carolina.
So, good afternoon. I am here to show you about leatherwork. Leatherwork dates back to the earliest known civilizations. In recorded history, leatherwork dates back to 1300 BC, down through the Roman era, through the Middle Ages, and into modern Europe. In North America, the native Indians used leatherwork or the skills of tanning animal skins to make everyday items that were necessary for their survival. And they also made decorative items and ceremonial clothing. And when the European immigrants came across the pond to settle the colonies, they also brought their skills of leatherwork with them. The ability to tan and process animal skins and to make various items necessary for daily survival. They had honed those skills all the way through the centuries and brought those skills with them. So in the early colonies, the youngest of children were required to help with daily chores around the house, and they were also skilled with survival skills, meaning that they knew how to hunt and to fish and to skin animals and preserve the meat and to use the hides later to make necessary items for daily survival. So the art of leatherwork goes back for many centuries, and there's a wide variety of things that can be made from leatherwork, from our shoes that we wear, to our belts that hold our pants up, to purses, pocketbooks, those types of things that we use today. Briefcases are what was known back then as satchels. That's the only way that those folks had a way to carry the things, their possessions, with them. So I'm here to show you just a little bit of the process of leatherwork. So when you remove the skin from the animal, and most of the leatherwork that people use today is derived from cows. It can be from any type of animal. It can be a bear to a deer to a goat to an ostrich to even a rattlesnake. Rattlesnake skins are used to make belts and to make shoes, that type of thing. So, but mostly it is cowhide. And this is an example of a piece that is cut precise. So believe it or not, when you do leatherwork, a lot of math is involved in the process because you have to know what item you're going to make and you have to figure out what size it needs to be. So you have to use your math to figure that out. So most of them most of the hides come in a full hide, like you can see, as big as this table. And then you decide what project you're going to make, and you cut it down to the correct size. So this would be a wallet, which would be this size here, and this is a finished one. So the art of doing something like that would be, the first thing that you have to do is you have to wet the leather so that it remembers what you do to it. So you wet it, and it has to stay a nice, cool feel to the leather, if that makes any sense to you. So, and actually we used to say that it's a magic liquid, but honestly and truly it's just good old natural water. So in order to properly do something as far as leather work is concerned, you would take and make yourself a line so that you can stay nice and square. So this is what you would call a pencil, and I call a stylus tool. It's what you use to mark into the leather. So once you've made that gauge where you're so far off of for a border, so to speak, so this is called a swivel knife, and the reason that it's called a swivel knife is that it swivels in all directions. And this is called a saddle, and you place your finger right here in that so that you can turn it in any direction. So we're just going to come down through here, and we're going to make a nice clean cut into the leather, nice and straight. So what we can do now is we can take this and we can decorate it in any form that we so choose. For example, like we could do it like this right here for a border. We could do a decorative, what's called basket weave, which is this right here. Or we could decide that we wanted to do some type of a flower, or like Sheridan style carving, which is your flowers and your vines. That's when the Spanish people were very instrumental in what is called Sheridan style carving, which is something similar to this right here, which is your flowers and your vines. They studied the native floral things that were growing in their area that they lived in. They set out to draw that back onto a piece of leather. So that's all your decorative, like your old saddles and your decorative items that they had. So the easiest way for you to see how to create, and we'll just do a really quick little border here. We'll make sure that we're still good and wet. So we can take, and this is called a maul, and so you want to place this just right here. You'll pop it one time and you follow it in each line. And it's kind of like when you hit a ball. Don't take your eye off the ball or you'll miss. So if you take your eye off what you're doing, you'll hit yourself. And believe you me, it doesn't feel good to do that. So and that is just an example of how you would go all the way around and create like a border on a wallet. So another thing that you could do is, and these are just some scrap pieces that I have. So if you decide you wanted to freehand, so our native flower for North Carolina is the dogwood, which should be right there. So you can take your pencil, just like you were going to draw a picture on a piece of paper. So you make your centerpiece, and a dogwood flower only has 4 petals. So you draw it out. And if you wish to put like a stem on it and a leaf. So I don't know if you can see that very well or not, but that's when it's drawn out. That's like if you were to take a pencil on a piece of paper and draw it out. And then you come back with this swivel knife and you precisely stay in your lines, just like if you were, when you learned how to color, don't get out of the lines. Because if you get out of the lines, then you can't erase it. That's the one thing about leatherwork. It's, once you take the knife to it, it's there. So you have to kind of live with it from that point. And the reason that the swivel knife is called a swivel knife, I guess, is so that it swivels and you are to turn it and spin it. It's not a good idea to pick it up out of your leather. You try to connect all pieces. Okay, so there's that cut in there. And that's your dogwood flower. So then your next step is you take something called a beveler. There's several different sizes, like these are kind of a medium and a small. So what you actually do when you're tooling leather is you're tamping down, and you have to sometimes hold something down that's like a paperweight that keeps it from moving, so it stays still while you're working on it. So you actually tamp down the outside around the edges of what you drew, and it gives the eye the impression that it is raised up, that the image that you're putting into the leather is raised up, but in all actuality, you're tamping down the outside of it, but your eye perceives it as being raised up. And then you take a little one when you have to get in a tight spot. And go all the way around. What I'm doing right now is going all the way around the center of the inside of the dogwood flower. And then you have something called, these are modeling spoons, which actually kind of smooth the leather out just around it. And you can kind of take it and make everything kind of connect just a little bit smoother, where it wouldn't quite, where your beveler wouldn't quite get in there smooth enough. Kind of like if you do make a mistake and you do have like a little spot that shouldn't be in there, so to speak, this will somewhat erase it. Okay, so we would need to work on this just a little bit more, but that is your dogwood flower, and it just needs a little bit more work to kind of make it look exactly like it's supposed to. So you can take something called it's called a lifter, and you can take it and pop it up underneath the petals, and it'll make the petals pop up off of the leather, and it actually lifts it up. So that makes it pop up a little bit more. And then you can take your knife and you can make some decorative cuts like that and make it stand out a little more. And then it jumps off the page a little bit more. So that is how to do a dogwood flower. Then you can take your, there's all kinds of things that you can do with your swivel knife. You can make just decorative cuts. You can write your name. Like I said, you can make decorative cuts like this. Just any type of things that anything your imagination can come up with, you can create. Here is what's going to be a ship. I don't know if you can see that. Can you get in on that and see that? Where I have already drawn the ship on here. Okay. So in order to, you would just wet it, and then you come through with your swivel knife and you cut it out. How are we doing on time? So I still have some more to do, but so you can see the ship starting to come to life. And then we'll do the same process on the ship as we did the dogwood flower and raise it up off of the leather to show. So this would be a checkbook, and it's made out of with hair on, which is when the hair has not been separated from the skin. This is a crocodile right here, of course a horse head, and butterflies, and a sea turtle. And this was the wallet we mentioned earlier. The North Carolina Lighthouse, Cape Hatteras, and the cardinals, and the dogwood flowers, and gun holsters, 2 different kinds. So if I were in the 1800s, middle 1800s, and I was a leather worker in my shop, people would bring to me shoes or boots to be repaired. They could bring what we would call a briefcase today, but they would call it a satchel back then for repairs. That was the only way people had to carry their clothes or items they needed to carry with them. A belt possibly any type of a saddle, any equipment like that a horse would need, harness, mules, that sort of thing. Leatherwork for repairs and or to create new. Gun holsters. I mean, back then sidearms were carried all the time. So anything from a gun holster to a rifle scabbard, possibly a knife sheath. They had to have knives for skinning, knives for just various reasons. Hatchets, covers for hatchets. Any sorts of things. A lot of times back then they wore things like cowboy cuffs, so they would have had things to protect their arms when they were working outside. Possibly even leather clothing items like maybe your heavier coats or maybe chinks or chaps that your cowboys wore, your workers wore, aprons type things to keep them from being injured for various reasons, for protection. Anything along that line we could have either repaired or created.